Welcome, everyone. This is the Golden Gate Computer Society monthly meeting. I am Marcelino Nogueiro, president of the Golden Gate Computer Society, and we have a special guest, Adam Compton, which I will have Karen maybe say a couple of words here in a second. But for a little housekeeping, please keep your microphones muted. Whilst we're recording, if you speak and the Zoom hears a little noise, it will put you on the stage front and center, and now your face will be all over the place. So where possible, stay muted so that any, dogs barking or kids running around, whatever it may be, you don't disrupt the recording. And let's see, what was the other thing? We will have a Q&A at the end, so if you can just hold your questions towards the end, unless it's something like super, you got to have an answer right this second. You can raise your hand. There's a little react button at the bottom. And if you click on that, there's a raise your hand option. So you can just, and there'll be a little hand on the screen by your name. Adam will see that, find a good place to pause and try to answer your question. But if you can hold the questions to the end, I think it'll be a little smoother. Adam has got a pretty extensive presentation. Hopefully we won't be here all night. He's going to keep it short. The subject is extremely interesting, and I'm looking forward to hearing all about it. Karen, you want to say a couple of
Sure.
words? You're the ones that found Adam, and you know all about this stuff. Go for
Well,
it.
I don't know all about the stuff, but I certainly know Adam. Good evening, everybody. My name is Karen. Uh, and Adam and I are both students at the same karate studio, but I've discovered that he's got a wealth of knowledge about computers since he does it for a living, and it just seems so natural at it. And it explains things in such a way that it just makes such complete sense. I was just thinking we have had him here before when we were talking about, I believe it was the driverless vehicles, I believe it was. And I just really wanted to have him back, but when he started telling me about this pie hole thing, um, I just thought it was fascinating, and I thought the rest of you might find it as well. So, without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Adam. Thanks for being here.
Awesome. Thank you.
And thank you for that introduction. So I'm Adam. I'm going to share my screen and then I'll get started. Okay. So I believe you guys should be able to see my screen now. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah, we see it. Thank you. That's great.
Okay. So I'm going to be talking about ad blocking using a tool called Pi-hole. I do want to set expectations early on. The Pi-hole tool is not trivial to use, so I'm not going to be going in detail through how you will use it, how you could use it yourself. I'll have some resources for that, and I'll walk through some examples, but setting it up is very specific to the network that you have at your house, so it's hard to create a general guide for using it. I'll be explaining more about how the technology works and what it's doing underneath that allows it to block ads in the first place. So, outline. Background of ads and advertising technology. Background of DNS, the domain name system. How Pi-hole blocks ads. How to run Pi-hole. And then I'll save some time for Q&A at the end. Before I jump in, does anyone have any questions so far? Okay. So, who am I? I'm a software and infrastructure engineer. I have 20 plus years of experience in tech, including 7 years at an advertising technology company. So, sorry. I've worked in many different industries, finance, enterprise, manufacturing, and mostly I support backend infrastructure and scaling. So, for example, at my current job, I work on self-driving cars, and we train AI to drive the car. That requires bringing to bear the combined might of literally tens of thousands of computers all at the same time. So the kind of work I do is getting tens of thousands of computers to do the same thing at the same time. So for background, what is an ad? How does Pi-hole know which things to block? How do internet advertisements actually work? And what is DNS and how does it work? In order to understand what Pi-hole does and how it works, you need to understand both of these things. They're both critically important. So I'll go through all of them. That's kind of what we're going to be covering here is how these things converge. And then I want to use this terminology. So I'm going to lay it out up front. An advertiser is someone who wants to get their message out. If you see a web page and there's an ad box on it that wants you to click on it or buy something, that's an advertiser's message. A publisher is someone who runs a website that people visit. So you go to CNN, you see an ad on it. The publisher is CNN, the advertiser is, Expedia, whomever placed the ad. Real quick, the history of internet advertising and ad tech. I promise this won't be very painful. I'll go fast. In 1994, the first banner ad was placed. And some of you may actually be familiar, may remember this ad. But this was the first time that a display advertisement was used on the internet, and the early ads were included directly in web page code as clickable image links. So the person who wrote the web page had an image, just like any other image they might have. But when you clicked on that image, instead of going to a different page on that site or that person owned, instead it went to AT&T's website. So you might imagine that doesn't really scale. It's hard to manage all of that stuff and make sure you don't break anything. So shortly thereafter, the first ad server technology was deployed. And what this does is instead of directly including a specific image in your web page, you include a link to the ad server. And the ad server receives the image request and decides on the fly what ad to show, and then gives it to the browser. It occurs to me, I should probably have a slide here. I'll be real quick about this. When you use your browser to look at the page on the internet, you go to the page and you get back something called HTML, which is the description of all the text on the page. And it also has markup that says how other elements on the page that aren't just its text should be included and formatted and structured. Some of those elements can be ads, or can be images rather. So there's an image tag that can appear in the text of a page that says to the browser, go load an image, go make a request for an image from any site, and then retrieve the bytes from that image and put it in the browser window in this page in this place. So the first banner ad was just loading an image off of that local web server, just like anything else on the site. This ad server technology says, I'm going to include an image in my page, but instead of a fixed static image that's a GIF file that's on a server somewhere, it's going to be a call to the ad server. The ad server figures out what ad to display, and then it returns the bytes. So the image that you get is actually decided on as the page is loading. That's something that's and that continues today, how that works. So each page could have different ads depending on what campaigns were configured in the ad server, and the ad server would have a fixed list of campaigns it could serve images from. So that technology being deployed required the publishers to run an ad server, and many publishers did not want to do that or did not have the skills to do that themselves. So companies that were operating as ad networks started popping up. And these companies worked as a middleman to pair together advertisers and publishers. So if you were an advertiser, you would start some number of campaigns with an ad network. And if you were a publisher, you would register with the ad network. And so the ad network would have a bunch of different campaigns on one side and a bunch of different publishers on the other. And when someone visits a website and loads one of these dynamic ad placements, then the ad network would figure out based on which publisher, based on which advertisements were available, what their constraints were. Maybe if you go to fieldandstream.com and they want to show you an advertisement for a pickup truck, right? So they figure out what campaigns would suit, and then they dynamically create and return the appropriate image. You can think of this as using a software as a service ad server instead of running your own. The first really prominent ad network is called DoubleClick. They were acquired by Google for a gazillion dollars at the time, and that is to this day the foundation of a lot of Google's advertising technology. So, as a sidebar, real-time bidding. Instead of having a fixed list of campaigns, ad networks conduct an auction for each ad slot on a page view. And advertisers connected to the real-time bidding auction platform place bids while the page is loading and the winning ad is shown. And this is actually the technology that I worked on when I worked for the ad tech company. So um, let's say you go to a website and there's a slot for an ad. Your browser makes the request for the image, and within 100 milliseconds, literally a tenth of a second, the request, uh, the metadata about your request, your browser, your user ID, your IP address, location, all that stuff, is fanned out to everybody participating in that auction. Everybody in that auction places a bid and sends back an image that they want to show. And then those bids are all received by the auction server, and the winning bids advertisement is shown. And this happens a trillion times a day within 100 milliseconds. Every time you load an ad on a web page, everywhere, and in apps on your phone, this is what's going on behind the scenes. Um, you don't need to know this part of it to understand how Pi-hole works, but whenever I tell people this is actually what's happening on their computer, they're just completely flummoxed. So I thought it would be interesting to you guys to know that this was a thing that was going on. So this is just a little chart of what's going on that I was describing. So you have your phone, you can see the big ad slot right here in the middle. The When you load the web page, right, the ad request is sent to the real-time bidding platform. That bid request is fanned out to all the advertisers who are subscribed. They submit their bids. The winning bid is the advertisements proffered by the winning bid is selected and delivered back to your device. So this entire loop happens for every single ad image in your browser every time you load a page within 100 milliseconds. So this is an example of a web page. I just went to CNN.com. I turned off my ad blocker so I could capture this for you. I've highlighted here, there's the big red top ad at the top, the Welcome to Dairy. And then there's also this little ad down in the corner here. Depending on the page, you may see more or fewer ads, but this is these images inside these red boxes. To make them appear on my computer, a real-time auction was held in the way I've just described, where my computer's IP address and browser referrer and all that stuff was sent out to every auction participant, and then they all placed their bids. And someone, offered to pay 1/17th of a cent to show me the It Welcome to Dairy ad and won that auction and paid the money, and that's the ad I got. Another sidebar. So this real-time bidding process explains how advertisers can track you. Ad networks receive requests from lots of different publishers, and this is like when you load ads. These generally include some unique per-person identifying code. If you've heard of something called a tracking cookie or a tracking pixel, that's how these are the technical implementation of how this is done. So this means an ad network can see every page you visit because any page that you load an ad on, the biggest ad networks have placements with basically every publisher in the world. So those ad networks can actually see every page you visit and build a personalized profile of your web browsing history. This profile can also be joined to offline data like supermarket loyalty card purchases or even what shows you watch on TV. Modern smart TVs actually have hardware in them that's constantly taking a picture of the screen, what's on the TV, and figuring out what it is, what show it is, what channel you're watching, what if it's a Netflix streaming from the logo or whatever. And then that information is sent back to the TV manufacturer so that the TV manufacturer can actually sell the data of what people are watching on its TVs to companies that want to sell ads. This is another thing that happens all the time. It's called automatic content recognition, and I tell people, and they don't believe that it's true. but it really is. As a side note, you can generally opt out of this in your TV. Buried in the settings somewhere, there'll be a setting that says you can opt out of automatic content recognition, and that'll disable this functionality. So ad tech is a burning nightmare. Um, this is a famous chart in the ad industry called the Lumascape landscape. This is specifically the display advertising one. There's lots of different ones for other kinds of advertising, but each of these little tiny boxes is a whole entire company. And we have everything from the agencies on the left-hand side that represent the advertisers or marketers. Creative optimization is making, like, generating the little ad images on the fly. Media planning is figuring out what publishers you want to work with, managing the tags on your website. The demand management platforms, data curators, they feed into the demand side platforms, feed into the ad exchanges, and this is what does the real-time bidding. And then all of this is where the publishers get involved, where they actually have all the advertising technology that is incorporated on their sites that actually shows the ads. Uh, so yeah, it's nuts. It's absolutely nuts. The advertising industry is incredibly huge, and nobody knows about it because they don't tell anyone that they exist outside of advertising. But there's a lot going on behind the scenes just browsing around the internet or using your phone. So that's the ad tech part of things. I want to take a break to pause. I know I ran through that pretty quick because I know we got. I want to make sure I get through this in a reasonable time. Does anyone have any questions about the ad tech stuff that I covered before I get into the DNS stuff? I'm not hearing anything, so I'm going to move on.
Yes. I'm sorry, I couldn't find my unmute. I just have a quick question because I did this TV presentation the last few meetings. Does this mean I should turn off that ACR setting on my TV?
I mean, it depends on whether you care that the TV is constantly spying on you and figuring out what you watch and sending that information back to the manufacturer.
It irks the hell out of me, but I think I will turn it off. Thank
Yeah,
you.
that's partly why TVs are so cheap nowadays, and partly why you cannot buy a non-smart TV, is because they want you to hook the TV up to the internet so that it can run this automatic content recognition. The functionality of the TV to, like, let you run things on it, they don't care. That is like a fourth order concern. Mostly they want to be able to constantly spy on what you're watching and send that home.
Yes, I discovered this in a number of different layers. So I actually know where to find this, but there were a number of user agreements that you needed to just to use minimum features on the TV. Excuse me, you had to agree to at least two user agreements just to be able to watch, excuse me, anything. And so I'm going to go back in there and change some of the settings on there. Thanks so much, Adam.
Yeah, sure. And you'll notice if you want to buy a computer monitor that is roughly the same size as a TV, they don't typically make 55-inch computer monitors, but you could get a 30-inch monitor and a 30-inch TV. The monitor is going to be way more expensive because the monitor is not subsidized by spying on your viewing and sending that information to ad companies. Excuse me. Anyway, so that's the ad tech side. The other side of how Pi-hole works is DNS. The domain name system, or DNS, translates human readable names like google.com to something called an IP address that are what computers use to find websites. For example, google.com translates to the IP address 142.251.32.46. How these numbers are used to find websites is called internet routing. That's outside the scope of this talk, and I have a link here if you want to learn more about that. But that's if you want to go someplace on the internet, the computer does not understand the human readable text. They don't, like, google.com means nothing to the computer. So it needs to be translated into a number that the computer can use. In the same way that if you want to call your friend, you can't type your friend's name into your telephone. Well, I mean, smartphones you can, but with the old-timey, like, push-button telephones, you had to put in their phone number. So in the same way that we used a phone book to look up the phone number for a person, DNS is a phone book for the whole internet. Your computer looks up the phone number of a website when you visit it. And you might have seen sometimes in your computer or your browser, if that process gets interrupted, the computer can't find the website, and you'll see an error like a DNS resolution error. That might seem familiar. Um, your internet service provider offers a phone book as part of the service they give you. Because if they didn't, you couldn't go anywhere, right? You'd have to memorize all of these numbers to use your computer. So the phone book that translates names into numbers is part of what the ISP, the service the ISP provides includes. So this is the meat of it. This is how Pi-hole blocks ads. Since the introduction of ad servers, advertisements are not included directly in the web page. They're selected and delivered at page load time by an ad server, which is generally part of an ad network. Your computer uses the phone book to look up the ad server and send it the request to display an ad. Pi-hole just erases all the ad servers from the phone book. So when your computer tries to look up an ad server from an ad network, instead it gets nothing. You cannot connect. There's no answer. This is a fake name that doesn't exist. And the way that the browser and the websites are designed is if it can't load an ad, typically it just falls back to an empty square. So all publishers use ad networks, and instead of including the advertisements directly, they do a lookup. If the lookup fails, no ad is displayed. As just a sidebar, you can also include ad blockers as a feature of a browser, like an extension or add-on. These work differently than Pi-hole. The ads are typically still requested and loaded, but the ad blocker technology prevents them from being displayed. So your browser still goes out to the ad server, asks for the ad, the auction still happens, your data is still sent out, it gets the image, and then the ad blocker extension or add-on just prevents it from being shown. So it's visibly looks very much the same, but there's a lot of work going on behind the scenes still that the ad blocker allows that something like Pi-hole prevents. So loading ads in this way still enables tracking malicious ads, even if they're not visible. So the I realize I should have included this slide here. Pi-hole is a service that operates as a phone book. And what it does behind the scenes is it has a list of ad networks. And when you would look up in the phone book one of these ad networks, instead it says, no, I will give you nothing, jump on a link. Otherwise, it does the normal phone book lookup that you would expect. So that's what Pi-hole is it's a replacement phone book service, right? There's two main ways to run it. You can either just run it directly on your computer that you're using day to day, or you can put it on a central computer in your network, and then every computer and device, like phones and TVs and such, get the benefit of that modified phone book that doesn't know how to talk to ad networks. Either way you run it, you have to make your computer ask Pi-hole for its phone book instead of using the one from your internet service provider. And unfortunately, just nobody sells a push button device where you can buy it and plug it in and all the ads go away. They would be sued to oblivion if anyone tried. So it's not it's one of those things where the software is hard enough to use that it kind of flies below the radar and nobody gets too mad about it. But if someone made a trivial way to just block all the ads in your house, that would be very controversial to lots of parties. So we'll cover one example of how to run Pi-hole here, but there are lots of tutorials on the internet for how to do this if you want to do it. So the first part is getting a computer to run your Pi-hole on. This can be a very small and low power computer. The one that's linked here costs only $40 and you can power it with a USB plug and it'll do the trick. It's got Wi-Fi built in. It works. You install Pi-hole on the computer. Typically, computers this small will run Linux, and then you can just SSH in and install the Pi-hole software. There are distributions of Linux that come with Pi-hole automatically pre-configured, so you can write one of those to a flash SD card, and then put the SD card in this tiny computer and turn it on, like plug it in, and it'll just work. But you still have to configure your network to use this phone book. I linked here an example. Um, Cloudflare is an internet company, and they provide a phone book service, this DNS service. Um, so you can follow these instructions to change the DNS server of your computer, but you would use the Pi-hole's IP address instead of that of the instead of Cloudflare's. So that's the end of what I came prepared with. I am happy to take any questions that you guys have at this time. I can elaborate on any piece of this that you want more information about. I can shut the hell up if you're tired of hearing from me. Whatever you guys want.
Well, Adam, first of all, thank you very much. That was great. And I kind of want to see if you ask you if you have a Raspberry Pi set up to do this already, or which one of those options are you recommending, if
Sure.
any?
So for me personally, because I do the computer stuff for a living, I have a lab at my house. I have several computers in it. They talk to each other. They do different stuff. So I run Raspberry Pi as one of the, or rather, sorry, run Pi-hole as one of the services in that lab. Um, that's way more than I would recommend for anybody else. The thing that I would recommend for a general audience is get one of these small computers. The specific kind of computer that I'm thinking of is called a Raspberry Pi. You can buy them for $30 or $40. They're relatively decent spec computers for how cheap they are, and you can run Linux on them. I mean, you can run Windows on them, but they're pretty low spec, so it wouldn't work very well. Um, so you get the little computer, plug it in a USB port just for power. And then it's got Wi-Fi built in. You can install the Pi-hole software on it, and then you can configure the devices on your network to use that as the DNS server, the phone book, instead of using the phone book provided by your ISP, and then you get the ad blocking.
Okay.
That's what I'd recommend. But the issue is that configuring all of the devices to use that is a very specific setup that you have to do. You either have to modify the DNS settings for each device, or you have to go into your router and tell the router what DNS server it should use when it hands out IP addresses to devices on the local network. And then that interface is different for every router, and it's different if you have a router provided by your ISP, like your cable company or your DSL company, or if you have one that you bought yourself. So it's way too varied for me to go into how to do that in any particular way. But what I would recommend is get the small cheap hardware, put the Pi-hole software on it, and then figure out how to tell your computers to use it.
Right. Well, yeah, I wanted to kind of get that. One thing is, we're going to go ahead and stop recording so that when we put it on YouTube, it's just we get to this point and it gives a little bit of freedom for people to ask more questions. So thank you very much. I'm going to stop the recording now, unless somebody has something to say that they want to make sure that gets put on the recording. Maybe James, is your question something that is generic enough that, or we want to save that for the Q&A?
I don't mind if it's on the recording. Adam, thank you for the talk. I understand the distinction you're talking about between the what happens with the Pi-hole service and what happens when you're running a regular web browser ad blocker. What my question is, um, knowing something about, I've been running a web browser called Brave for quite some time now, and it appears to be much better at ad blocking than most other browsers are out of the box. Do you have a comment or a thought about particular browsers or in Brave in particular?
Yeah, Brave is fine. So Brave comes with it's a fork. I think it's a fork of Chromium.
It
Sorry.
is. It's a yeah. It runs on the Chrome, the open source Chromium base, but
Yeah.
it's a separate development.
And it comes with a bunch of ad blockers and other security software pre-installed. So that's a
Right.
fine choice. I know that there were some controversies with Brave several years ago where they were stealing affiliate links. I don't know if they still do that. They got caught. They got in trouble. So I think they righted the ship, but I don't off the top of my head know if they are still doing that. But broadly
No, I
speaking,
don't believe so, but
I don't use it, so I'm willing to believe you that they.
what browser do you use?
I use Firefox. Um, So the relevant piece of this here is the Google Chrome browser is actually the underlying software that's used for most web browsers that
Right.
exist. Obviously Google Chrome itself, but also Internet Explorer Edge, or Microsoft. I call it nowadays, but that's Chromium underneath. Brave is Chromium underneath. So most browsers are this one specific technology, with different designs, different branding on it. Firefox is a different technology base. It's a completely different system, different company, different renderer, different everything. So I just personally like there being choice in browser technology, and if everybody uses Chrome, then no one will, like, Firefox development will wither away. So I use Firefox because I want it to continue existing in the world.
Yeah. All right. Thank you. Let me stop the recording and then we'll keep on going with the Q&A. Thank you, everybody.